Hello and welcome to State Matters. I'm your host, Matt Muratore. My guest today is a graduate of UMass Amherst, where he received a Bachelor's of Art in 1988 and a graduate of Suffolk University Law School, receiving his JD in May of 1991. He was the first elected sheriff of Plymouth County in 2004, and prior to serving as Plymouth County's top law enforcement post, he served almost 9 years as an assistant district attorney for Plymouth County. He's a lifelong resident of Plymouth County, growing up in Marshfield and now residing in Kingston. Please join me in welcoming Sheriff Joe McDonald Jr. Sheriff, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
So we always like to start our shows off with who is Joe McDonald, and for the handful of people out in Plymouth County that do not know who you are, tell us who Joe McDonald is.
Well, you did a pretty good summary there of
I did my homework.
My resume. Yeah, no, I'm impressed by that. Yeah, but I'm a lifelong Plymouth County guy, originally from Marshfield. I'm living in Kingston. I've been the sheriff now for over 10 years. I'm in my 11th year as sheriff. Hard to believe, I've actually been the sheriff now longer than I was an assistant DA. And
how'd you get into the DA's job?
Well, that was an interesting story. I always, when I was a kid, I knew I wanted to pursue a legal career.
You did, okay.
And
what made you think that?
Well, I think it was very.
My wife always did too, and everyone seems to have a reason why they want to pursue.
Yeah, I always wanted to. I wanted to be a lawyer because I always felt that they were very knowledgeable, that they knew everything, they had all the answers.
Okay.
And then I went to law school and I graduated law school and I realized I still didn't have all the answers. Mm-hmm. So slowly I realized that lawyers don't generally have all the answers, but they know where to look. So that was fun. But I wanted to be an assistant DA. I wanted to prosecute cases. I wanted to add to the criminal justice system to the extent that I could, and I was given that opportunity under Mike Sullivan when he was the Plymouth County DA, and then later under Tim Cruz at the DA's office.
Do you know Mike Sullivan was the head of human resources at Gillette back in 1981 when I started working at Gillette? I worked there for 9 years. I was a co-op student from Northeastern.
Wow.
And that's when I first met Mike Sullivan. And then he left after that and got into public life.
Elected state representative. Yeah, but that's a great story. I knew he came from Gillette.
Great guy. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm privileged to have been associated with Mike and to still, I talk to him from time to time. He's a great friend.
What were some of the highlights of some cases that you had?
Oh God, I think the most it's difficult to rank those cases because my career at the DA's office was very varied. I started out as a young ADA assigned to the Department of Revenue. So what I was doing was I was working in the General Counsel's office at Department of Revenue for criminal non-supports. And what that means is that when you have individuals who aren't paying their child support, people could request and still can request from Department of Revenue to have services, legal services, on their behalf. A lot of times too, if someone is getting public assistance, they are required really to cooperate with this so that we can chase down and recoup some of those monies either on behalf of the state or that custodial parent. So I did that for a very long time, and very early out of the gate there was a case where one of the 10 most wanted was coming back. Now, I had only been with the DA's office, a period of months. And this guy was coming back from Russia. Supposedly he was a Russian mafia guy. His ex-wife was living in Pembroke, and they grabbed him at Logan Airport. And the next thing I knew, I was in Plymouth District Court having to arraign this guy in front of all the TV cameras, and no less than the Commissioner of Revenue was there trying to tell me how to do the case, and it was a real sideshow. But that was great. But I was in all of the district courts. I was in the jury sessions. Ultimately, managing for a period of about 5 years the Plymouth District Court. So I was glad to be in Plymouth because this really is where my heart is, in Plymouth.
And you live in Kingston now,
and I live in
family.
Kingston.
Yeah. And so, what made you decide to be a sheriff and run for sheriff?
Well, it's interesting.
Is that was your first public run for anything?
Correct.
Yeah.
I've never.
You really went to the top.
Well, thank you for that. But I thought I could do a better job. I watched from the sidelines as I was in a different venue in the criminal justice system, and I looked and I saw things going on at the sheriff's office, and said, I think I can do a better job than what's happening down there now, and I was able to put the wherewithal together, and I took a leave of absence from the district attorney's office because I thought that was the appropriate thing to do. And I ran and I won. And that was, you know,
It's a tough
11,
thing to do.
11 years
27
ago.
towns and really somewhat of an unknown at that point to
Right.
try to do this.
Right, yeah, it was, my first campaign literature was my resume, you know, and these are the things that I've done, and this is who I am. This is my education, and, you know, I think I can do a better job, and I hope that history's borne me out. I think that it has.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us, what does the sheriff do? You know, what is the? It's more than just a jail.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So tell us some of the things that you do there.
The sheriff's office is very, it's much larger than people might imagine. Now, sheriffs in various parts of the country, geographically and historically, do different things. If you go south or you go west, you find that the sheriff's offices do a lot of frontline patrol and law enforcement work, like our police departments do. In those areas, though, historically they're different from us. They have cities or towns with large bits and pieces of unincorporated lands, so basically lands that aren't patrolled by a town police department. So they do those in conjunction with the state police and the local police there. We don't do that in Massachusetts, and actually over the counties here in Massachusetts we're different. There's 14 counties, 13 of us run correctional facilities. The only exception is Nantucket. They don't have any of their inmates are brought across over to Barnstable County and held there. The Vineyard does have its own correctional facility. Yeah, it's only about 30 inmates as compared to our 1,650 capacity. But
That's what you have, yeah.
yeah, our population right now is about 1,100, give or take. But in Massachusetts, we're all a little bit different. Here in Plymouth County, you know, obviously the jail is the biggest thing that we do. But we have so many things outside of the jail that we provide a lot of backup and support services to our local law enforcement. And I'd say public safety in general, because we do, through our communications center, we do CMED, the County Medical Emergency Dispatch. So we're doing the communications patches between ambulances and hospitals. Whenever there's a large fire incident, the mutual aid is going to be coordinated through our communications center. There's an on-call control chief, a fire chief that would take control of that. But those coordinations would take place, and this is what units are going to be responding from what towns to the scene, and who's going to do station coverage, things like that. So that's something that Communications Center does more than our single agency dispatches, which they do too. A huge thing that we have, the only other place that has this is Barnstable County, is BCI, Bureau of Criminal Investigation. People may see those cruisers driving around the county. What they do is they're sort of like a CSI type group. They've been around since the 1950s, so I don't take credit for their existence. But I like to think that under my watch down there, we've made things better. We've improved things technologically. We've gotten a grant recently from the Executive Office of Public Safety to go with live scan new fingerprint machines all throughout the county. And I'm proud to say that for a long, long period of time, we have led the way here in Plymouth County, even more so than the state, in identifying latent fingerprints and identifying individuals who have been at crime scenes, identifying who those individuals are, and tying those things together. We have more IDs historically up to present in Plymouth County than all the other 13 counties combined, so they are really a great thing. We also have, which many people, unless you get involved in litigation, would not know, but we have a civil process office in Brockton, so we're essentially the mail carriers for the court system.
And you brought me this nice shirt, which I thank you so much.
Oh,
So tell me about
most welcome.
What some of the prisoners actually do there.
Well, what I
nice.
brought that for, I wanted to show that and have you show the viewers. You notice it's a nice shirt, but what's really nice about it is that embroidery that's there, and you can see it's a high quality job. Inside the jail, you know, people come to us for varying lengths of time. The average stay is about 9 months, and during that period of time, we don't often think, what do people do when they go in? And they do. The answer to that is they do a lot of things. We're essentially like a little town in there. So we've got our own food service office. We've got all kinds of things maintenance things that have to be cared for. But we also do a lot of rehabilitative programs and vocational programs. We've got the farm, which we operate as a vocational and a community asset as well. But what this represents is the product of our print shop. We've got a print shop that does brochures, pamphlets, all the way up to pretty good sized booklets and programs. And we do silk screening and embroidery now. So we are able to offer those services, and we don't offer them to the general public, but we do offer them to nonprofits and other government agencies.
Okay, yeah,
yes,
okay.
yeah. So if you knew of an agency that needed something, like a school was doing a field trip or something, and they wanted to get T-shirts printed to keep the kids all together and things, we could do those. But you look at this and you can see that the embroidery is very high quality.
Yeah.
There's a 200-hour program that the inmates participate in. When we do the farm festivals over there, we give out T-shirts that have also been designed and made by the inmates. They learn design, the computer-aided design, so they're working with the computers to come up with designs for these things. And generally speaking, a lot of people have been very, very surprised at the level of creativity that our inmate population can bring to positive things. And I'm not surprised, because I've seen them bring a great level of creativity to some not so positive things.
Right,
And so often we would sit in court and say, if only that guy had used his powers for good, he probably would have been successful. But this is just a nice example of that, and I take a lot of pride in the badge, and I'm glad to see that you'd have it. And I also want to say also that the stuff that we do, we really couldn't do without your assistance, and I want to thank you personally as we sit here, and so that the viewers know as well, that a lot of these things that we do, we're able to do because you guys are able to make sure that we get the funding to do all the stuff that we need to do. So for your efforts, I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I want to talk about the funding. So where's the funding come from? I assume most of it comes from the state, or all of it comes from the state?
Yeah, since 2010, we are officially a state agency. We switched over halfway through a fiscal year, and the way that all the sheriff's offices at one time were funded is that we were county agencies. We're still county agencies in the sense that that's our jurisdiction, but we are now funded as a line item. So the governor, when he puts the budget together, will put down what is the amount of funding that this sheriff's office and the other sheriff's offices are to receive. Before that, the problem was that our funding was tied directly into the county registry of deeds and how the real estate market was doing. So as the economy got bad, those deeds excise taxes would fall, and we would receive less funding, because that's what that formula was based on. And unfortunately for us, usually that downturn in the economy was also concurrent with an upsurge in crime. So we found that as times got tougher, our budgets got smaller, and our expectations and responsibilities actually got bigger. So now that we're a state agency, we've got, to a larger degree, we've got budgetary certainty, and it's worked out very well.
How much is the budget, your budget yearly?
The budget in our facility is about $55–56 million. There is still some echoes of the old system, in the sense that many of the sheriffs receive substantial amounts in the millions of dollars from federal agencies, because we do have partnerships with Immigration and Customs and also with the United States Marshal Service. We hold, as you know, a lot of high-profile inmates for the Marshals, and we hold and have held historically large numbers of Immigration and Customs detainees. They pay us for those, and what was happening initially, and this has since gone away, is that the state would estimate at the beginning of a fiscal year how much you were going to make. And with us, they were estimating every year that it was $16 million, which in one year we were actually able to make, but after that those numbers dropped off very precipitously. So what's happening now is they don't take that money out of our budget on the front end. What happens is that whatever money that we make now goes into the general fund. And I think that's a much better way to give us budgetary certainty.
And I also see that you're a supplement. They give you a supplement every year as well.
Yes, and that's
part of the 55, though.
Right, and and thank you for asking that question, because a lot of people are unaware, why are all the sheriffs getting a supplemental budget? And the reason is that the money that, if they set, let's say for the sake of ease of numbers, that's a $50 million budget, and they back out the let's say $10 million for whatever those incidentals are going to be, that the federal monies or whatever, they give you the $40 million, and then you come back later because you only made $5 million instead of 10 on federal revenues. So that $5 million, even though we call it a supplemental, only gets you up to what your budget was initially. So that's been a challenge, and it's very difficult to explain that to people. But the sheriffs, really all 14 sheriffs, are running a very, very good show, as far as the fiscal responsibility goes.
Yeah. So I know recently the governor has appointed you to another task force, but I want to talk about the first task force
Sure,
the governor appointed
yeah.
to, the opiates. And talk about the opiate crisis, particularly in Plymouth County, and what you're seeing inside the jail and outside the jail.
Sure, yeah. The jail, our population, as I said, has been as high as 1,650, is currently running around 1,100.
How many employees do you have, by the way?
We've got about 550 employees down there.
So it's okay for one for every 2 inmates then, basically.
Yeah, but not all those people work directly with the inmates. There's administrative staff, there's the BCI. We've got a lot of folks working over on the farm, which is also a rehabilitative program. But yeah, that's total, But what have I seen? I've seen a lot, and my thinking has changed a lot. I was honored to be asked by the governor to be on that, and I think part of the reason that they were thinking that way was the background that I brought, having been a prosecutor for about 9 years, and then the sheriff for about 10.
What was your thinking before the task force, and what was that afterwards?
It's interesting. People used to ask me, even when I was, after I had been elected sheriff, how many people were in the jail as a result of drugs? And I used to answer that question, very quickly, because all I would really, how many people are in there for the possession, the manufacture, the distribution, and those numbers are easily quantified, and I'd have an answer. But as I thought about it, I realized that it's not that easy, it's not that simple, and the answer is much harder to quantify, but I'll tell you the answer is most of the inmates are in there as a result of drugs and or alcohol. Because people, when they are under the influence of the drugs or the alcohol, do things that they would never otherwise do. They victimize their families, they victimize their friends, and they victimize strangers. So you've got people who are committing acts of violence. They're getting behind the wheel of an automobile under the influence and causing injury or worse. They are committing property crimes. They're stealing jewelry from their mother or their grandmother. They're doing terrible, terrible things, and it may not be reflected in the charge that they're serving time for. So you really have to look a little bit deeper underneath that. So I was glad to be able to bring that perspective to the governor's task force to say, look, we've got jail populations and house of correction populations that may have not been counted before as part of this opiate issue, but we really need to be thinking bigger than we were thinking. So it was good that I was able, I think, to bring that perspective to the task force.
What are you seeing now in the opiate crisis? Are you seeing it getting better, worse, the same?
I want to say that it's getting better, but I don't think that I can say that yet. I think it's going to get better because a lot of those changes that we were able to suggest, the governor's got a legislative package now that I hope is going to meet with some success. I know I'm going to try and get up and testify on behalf of that. But the most important thing, I think, is that we've really raised awareness now. People are aware of it, and sooner perhaps than they would have been otherwise. So I think that we're going to see some legislative action on this, and I'm hoping that we're going to see increased impetus on treatment and those types of things. You may be aware that down at the House of Correction, we have the first ever civilly committed unit down there. They do it over in Bridgewater under the auspices of Department of Corrections. They were terribly, terribly overcrowded in such a way that if someone were sent by a judge for 60 or 90 days, theoretically, to do a program, they might be there a week, and the overcrowding would push them. They came in the front door, that overcrowding would push them out the back door. So that they may have only been there for a week or two, and now they're back out on the street, they haven't completed a program, and what are they going to do? There's really, everything is against them. And then that poor judge who sent this individual for that period of time, hoping they would be successful, sees him within 2 weeks and says, wait a minute, I thought I sent this guy for 90 days. So what we've done is we've opened up, and it's going to be about 62 beds that we've got there. We've got about 50, 55 they're not inmates because they're civilly committed, but they're patients, I guess we would call them. And they're in there and they're getting all the benefits of the DOC program, which is a wonderful rehabilitative program.
DOC stands for?
Department of Corrections,
Okay.
Yep. So we're working with them and the Department of Public Health. and they're getting a good program in there.
So
and
that has started already?
that started, yeah,
great.
yeah, several months ago.
What, now,
and
is it licensed through the Department of Public Health?
it's well, it's a program that's run. It's not really licensed
That's not,
so
it doesn't
much.
need to be licensed, okay.
No,
okay.
because it's a state program.
Okay.
But the program itself, these are contractors that are
Got it.
certified and licensed by.
Okay.
We're not doing the programming. I didn't have the personnel. And Department of Corrections, they have contractors that do that, like from High Point and some
Yes,
of these
okay.
other.
So it's 62 beds?
62 beds ultimately is what we could fit there.
Okay.
I'm hoping, I know, at the task force, one of the things that some of the medical providers and public health folks were saying, and I don't disagree with this, was that we really don't want to have these individuals who are not criminals committed in a correctional facility. And I agree with that philosophy. But the problem is we have a crisis right now and no other place that is ready to take these individuals in to provide those services. And the other thing that I was thinking is, if I simply wait long enough, these individuals are very likely to commit crimes against family members or strangers, creating needless victims and then coming into the jail. You shouldn't have to commit a crime to avail yourself of this good program.
Yeah.
So in the short run, we had the space because prison populations, believe it or not, are declining statewide.
Mm-hmm.
That's a statewide thing. So we had that space, and I was thinking of it, and the Secretary of Public Safety called and said, "Could you do it?" And I said, I've been thinking about it. So we were able to get this program up and running, and I think we're saving lives. It's
You're probably saving dollars too, which is secondary to everything else, but you're probably saving dollars by not having inmates in there at the cost of X amount of dollars, per day.
Yeah, that's entirely possible and probable as well. But I think the most important thing, to me, is that we're giving these people the programming that they need. It's incrementally not costing us what it would cost to build something somewhere else because that building already exists. And we're essentially able to do the same thing because the unit that they're housed in, is entirely separate sight and sound from all of the rest of the jail. So they're not mixing at any point with the inmate population. They are completely self-contained. All the food and services are brought to them there. So they're able to get the benefit of that full program in a much saner environment than the overcrowded conditions that were at present at Bridgewater.
Yeah. So the governor recently, and this show's airing in January, so the governor has come out with a plan based on the task force. And the frustrating part for us as legislators is there is a debate coming up, but there's no action probably going to be seen this year. It may not be till January. And more lives are going to be lost because of it. But so tell us some of the highlights of the plan that you think are going to be helpful.
Well, I think a lot of the just the work of the task force itself. When I first got there, I didn't really know what to expect, and I noticed that there were people from law enforcement. The Attorney General's office was represented. There were a lot of people. There were people from chronic pain community that were there. There were some political people. There were a lot of people from programs that were there as well. And there were a lot of medical providers that were there. And I particularly enjoyed the interaction with them because I was curious about their perspective. And from their perspective, which was vastly different than my own, to them, to the doctors, their thinking was that if you got an individual and that individual was a heroin addict and now had transitioned to methadone or Suboxone, that was a victory. We'd cured somebody. And many of us, the activists and myself, we were, that's not a preferred, I mean, it's better than the heroin, but let's see if we can get these people clean and off of everything. That should be our goal. They were able to finally come to grips, the medical community, that we really do believe that more education is needed in medical school about the effects of these opiates. More education needs to be given to the providers who are prescribing these opiates, and don't look badly at vigilance like the prescription monitoring program. We want to make sure that as physicians are dispensing medications, that law enforcement's able to know, and they're able to know, that this individual that they just gave a 60-day supply or a 90-day supply of opiates to last week got a similar supply down the street from another doctor. So it's going to help us to identify the bad apples who might be running those pill mills. And I think we're not going to see that that's the case. But I think knowledge really is going to go a long way to help us. I do know that some of the governor's proposals have been met with some level of controversy. But I do think that as we work together with our colleagues in the medical community, that things are going to get better. We just have to remember that common sense safety rules in the prescribing and the use of these opiates is the most important thing. And knowledge is power.
Correct.
On all sides.
We had a meeting with the governor. We have a caucus meeting every month with the governor, and before he submitted his plan to legislature, he went over it with our caucus. And one of the things he was very passionate about was that 72 hours for the prescriptions from physicians. Very passionate about. One of my colleagues said, well, what about people are going to have to make separate co-payments and if they need opiates after 72 hours? What are we going to do about them? And he was very animated about that and very passionate about they really need him after 72 hours and they'll make the co-payment and they'll do it. Other than that, we need to stick to the 72 hours. Now, I think there'll be some wiggle room in there, but I think he's right on point with that.
Yeah, I do too. And I know that that's, when I mentioned the controversy, that's what I was alluding to. There have been a lot of people who have said that, why can't they get the 30-day supply? And that's historically been the case. And how did that work out for them?
Right. Yeah.
And that's, I think a lot of times we need to be protected essentially from ourselves.
Yeah.
Because, you may have, and I remember when I had my wisdom teeth out, I was given a very large supply of opiates, which I never used. And it was common, I found out afterwards. And, what people do sometimes, well, let's put those away for a day. You really, no, don't. Because people need to know that, maybe not their kids, but their kids' friends or workmen that come. I had a situation where my in-laws had some workmen in their house, and my father-in-law went to use the bathroom afterwards only to find out that one of the workmen had rifled the medicine cabinets. While they were there.
You're trying to sell a house, people are going through your house or your cabinets, et cetera. So, well, we're about out of time. I know you're going to be on another task force. And what's that going to be for?
That, again, I'm very honored that the governor had asked that I would do this. This is one to examine the entire criminal justice system to see if there are changes that we can make to increase the efficiency and decrease incarceration rates and really seek justice. I'm
good
pleased.
for you, and you're a good man for it.
Oh, thank you.
Real quickly, most famous inmate you've had?
Most famous inmate that's been there on my watch is definitely Whitey Bolton.
Whitey Bolton, I figured you were going to say that. Okay, Joe, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Oh, Matt, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed our show today. I want to thank the staff and volunteers at PAC TV for the great work they do. From all of us at PAC TV, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on State Matters.